Epidemiologists have found humans across the globe are becoming increasingly less fertile as toxic chemicals continue to build up in our environment and accumulate in our bodies. Research shows the worldwide fertility rate dropped by nearly 60% between 1960 and 2018, and sperm counts have been dropping at nearly the same rate. If this trend continues, some epidemiologists predict that sperm counts could reach zero by the year 2045. For more on this, I want to bring in Michael Bloom. He is an associate professor of public health at George Mason University. Professor Bloom, hormone-altering chemicals are being blamed for the decline in fertility rates across the globe. Where are these chemicals coming from?
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to chat with you this evening. Well, these chemicals, these endocrine disrupting agents, are manufactured, used in industry and in commerce and in commercial products. But also, we find many endocrine disrupting agents in our natural environment. They're found in our diet as a natural constituent of food, of plants, and also as liberated from the Earth's crust. Many metals or trace elements can also have endocrine disrupting effects, such as lead, mercury, arsenic, and cadmium can also have endocrine disrupting effects. So essentially, we are exposed to these agents from multiple sources.
And how concerned do we actually need to be? As you heard in my introduction, some scientists are predicting sperm counts reaching zero by 2045. That sounds alarming, and this drop in fertility rate. Can you put it into perspective for us?
Well, the scientific community is increasingly concerned that these agents, which affect hormone function, and hormones being the primary drivers of reproductive function and in orchestrating much of fetal development, are of critical biologic importance. And given a widespread and growing exposure to these agents, there is increasing concern that, yes, these agents may be playing a role in reproductive morbidities, disease, and problems in women and in men, and impacting fetal development, leading to adverse birth outcomes associated with low birth weight, preterm delivery, small for gestational age infants, but also long-term health effects from so-called fetal programming effects that may impact an individual's predisposition to obesity, heart disease, cancers later in life, so decades later after gestation. And so there is great concern about these chemicals and their impacts on reproductive health and fetal development.
So it sounds like you are, in fact, alarmed about this. Is there any way then to avoid these chemicals since they are so prolific in our society?
Well, I think avoidance would be a frustrating endeavor. I think that from my perspective, risk management is feasible. And there are steps that one can take on an individual level to try to mitigate one's exposure. And I think that contingent on the point in someone's life, some of these steps may be more or less of a priority than others. So, for example, we can limit our use of some commercial products, personal care products, for example, that tend to have high concentrations of various endocrine disrupting agents, especially if we're a pregnant woman or planning a pregnancy. This would be perhaps a good time to try to limit exposure to agents that interfere with hormonal function. One can, for example, vacuum one's home and ventilate more frequently, because we know a lot of these agents tend to accumulate in dust. In particular, if we have a small person, an infant or a toddler at home who spends a lot of time close to the ground, right, and frequently places their hands in their mouths. Hand washing is another approach. We can also limit our exposure to some of these agents that are used in food packaging or in the processing of prepackaged foods by opting for more home prepared meals and using fresh ingredients in order to limit exposure to some of these agents.
And Professor Bloom, when you're saying these endocrine disrupting agents, when people are looking, when they're concerned about this and they're looking on bottles, they're not going to see endocrine disrupting agents. So what should people specifically be on the lookout for?
Well, some of the agents of concern that my group has been studying are a family of compounds called phthalate diesters, and these are often added to plastics to make them soft and flexible, or added to personal care products as solubilizers. And fragrances as carriers. And so phthalate compounds are often added to products, but these may be labeled as fragrance, for example, in a product. So it really is difficult to ascertain whether or not a personal care product contains phthalates. Parabens are preservatives that are also endocrine disrupting and are used in personal care products and also in some food products. And again, this can be tougher to identify because of the labeling requirements don't necessarily require a manufacturer to disclose all of the components, but there are products that are labeled as phthalate-free or paraben-free, for example. Whether or not they are, I don't know, but I think that mitigate or reducing exposure in general, especially at critical times, such as planning a pregnancy, might be a prudent measure. And in this case, if we can say limit the use of a personal care product, of cosmetics or of hair care products or something along those lines, we can reduce our exposure during a period of great susceptibility, possibly, to adverse effects. So I think it really kind of depends on the individual, their exposure profile, what products and experiences they frequently encounter, and what's feasible for somebody in terms of their personal resources.
So it sounds like we do have some level of control if we're trying to get pregnant, or on the guy's part, I guess, trying to help conceive a baby. But it sounds like it's still an uphill battle for individuals, which must be very frustrating. What role do lawmakers play in being able to do anything about this?
Well, I'd like to dovetail on your point about the him side, and I couldn't agree more. He is just as important in terms of these exposures as the female partner. And so that's a great point, and I was remiss in not mentioning that. But in terms of policy, our system tends to be reactionary in that we assess risk after the fact. I think that individuals can support policies that require a precautionary approach, similar to what the European Union implements with their REACH legislation. And the mantra is no data, no market. And so demonstrating that an agent is safe or poses minimal risk before it is introduced into commerce or authorized would be a step in the right direction. Now, of course, every time an agent is removed, another agent replaces it. And oftentimes we end up back at square one trying to play catch up on risk assessment of the replacement agent. And so if we can try to move away from that reactionary framework, I think we'll be headed in the right direction.
All right. Professor Michael Bloom, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.